Picture yourself inside a dark, drafty barn in rural Ulster County, New York, on a bitter winter morning sometime around 1828. The air is so cold that every breath feels like swallowing needles. An 11-year-old girl stands barefoot on the frozen dirt floor. Her only garment is a single thin shift of coarse cotton that reaches barely to her knees. Fresh blood runs in thin rivers down her back, soaking into the fabric and dripping onto the ground. The man who claims ownership of her, John Neely, has just finished whipping her with a heavy bundle of green willow rods. He is red-faced and shouting because this child, who has only ever spoken Dutch, could not instantly understand the English orders he barked at her moments earlier. She does not scream. She does not fall to her knees. She does not beg or weep. She stands motionless, eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the barn wall, breathing in slow, deliberate rhythm. That child was named Isabella Baumfree. Decades later, the entire country would come to know her as Sojourner Truth, a woman whose voice would travel farther than any railroad, cut deeper than any whip, and help tear open the iron doors of American slavery. This is the true story of a girl who was auctioned off with farm animals, who lost the man she loved, who had her children stolen, who walked out of bondage on her own legs, who sued a white man in court and forced him to return her son, who stood before presidents and furious crowds, who asked one piercing question that still echoes through time. Ain't I a woman? Isabella Baumfree was born around 1797 in a small settlement called Swartikill, near the Hudson River in upstate New York. Her mother Betsy, called Mau Mau Bet by everyone, was a tall, dignified woman who carried herself with quiet pride even in slavery. Her father, James Baumfree, was already elderly when Isabella arrived. He had lost one arm years earlier in a farm accident and walked with a limp. Both parents belonged to Colonel Charles Hardenberg, a Dutch-descended landowner who kept a modest farm and a handful of enslaved people. The Hardenberg household spoke only Dutch, so Isabella grew up hearing no English at all. She never saw the inside of a schoolroom. She never held a book or learned an alphabet. When Colonel Hardenberg died around 1806 or 1807, Isabella was approximately 9 years old. The entire estate, land, livestock, furniture, and human beings, was inventoried and sold at public auction. Isabella remembered standing on the rough wooden auction block, clutching her mother's hand while strangers circled them, pinching arms, opening mouths to check teeth, discussing prices as though they were buying horses. She was sold together with a small flock of sheep to a storekeeper named John Neely, who lived several miles away. The price recorded was $100. From the moment she entered the Neely household, everything changed. The family spoke rapid English, a language she had never heard spoken before. She could not understand a single word of the commands shouted at her. When she stood frozen, confused, Neely and his wife beat her brutally, sometimes with fists, sometimes with sticks, sometimes with the flat of a shovel. She later recalled receiving more lashings in that house than meals. The scars on her back remained raised and visible for the rest of her long life. She learned English the hardest way possible, word by painful word, while scrubbing floors, carrying water, tending fires, and minding the Neely children. After several years of this treatment, she was sold again, this time to Martin Shriver, a rough, loud tavern keeper in the town of Kingston. Shriver worked her even harder than Neely had. She hauled heavy buckets from the well at dawn, scrubbed the tavern floors after drunken nights, carried armloads of firewood up and down stairs, waited on rowdy customers until late, and slept on the floor near the kitchen hearth when the work finally ended. She was still only a young teenager, yet already she carried the physical strength and the quiet, burning wisdom of someone decades older. Around 1810, at approximately 17 years old, Isabella was sold for the final time to John Dumont, a prosperous farmer in the New Paltz area. Dumont was widely regarded as one of the less cruel slaveholders in the region. He spoke Dutch fluently, which allowed Isabella to understand him from the first day. He promised her solemnly that if she remained hardworking and loyal, he would grant her freedom on July 4, 1827, the date when New York's gradual emancipation law would finally free the last enslaved adults in the state. She believed him completely. For the next 16 years, she worked harder than any laborer on the Dumont place. She plowed stony fields behind teams of oxen from sunrise until the light failed. She planted, weeded, and harvested wheat, rye, corn, buckwheat, and tobacco. She cut firewood, hauled water from a distant spring, spun wool into thread, wove cloth on a heavy loom, cooked enormous meals for field hands and family, nursed sick animals through the night, and cared for the Dumont children whenever their mother was ill. She also quietly helped the other enslaved people on neighboring farms whenever she could, sharing extra food, binding wounds with clean rags, whispering words of comfort in the darkness. During these years, she met and fell deeply in love with a young man named Robert, who belonged to a farmer named Catlin, who lived a few miles away. Their love was stolen in fragments, hurried meetings in the woods after moonrise, whispered promises under the trees, brief touches before they had to run back to their cabins. When Catlin discovered the relationship, he flew into a rage. He beat Robert so badly that the young man could barely walk for days. He forbade any further contact. Not long afterward, Robert was sold to a plantation deep in Alabama. Isabella never saw him again. The grief settled inside her like a cold stone she could never remove. She bore at least 5 children with a man named Thomas who worked the same farm: Diana, Peter, James, Elizabeth, and Sophia. She gave birth wherever she happened to be, in the field, in the barn, beside the hearth. She returned to work almost immediately because the work never waited. Each child was legally chattel. Each child could be sold at any moment. In 1826, 1 year before the promised date, Dumont suddenly announced that he was reneging on his promise. He claimed Isabella had not earned freedom because she had injured her right arm lifting heavy loads and could no longer perform full labor. Isabella knew this was a lie. She had worked harder than ever, injured arm or not. She understood clearly that Dumont simply did not want to lose her labor. She decided she would wait no longer. Before dawn one freezing morning in late 1826, Isabella rose silently. She wrapped her infant daughter, Sophia, only a few months old, in the warmest blanket she owned. She looked at her sleeping older children, Diana, Peter, James, and Elizabeth, and felt her heart shatter. She knew she could not carry all 5 at once. She knew Dumont would raise the alarm and hunt her down if she tried to take them. She kissed each sleeping child as softly as possible, whispered a promise she prayed she could keep, and slipped out into the darkness. She walked nearly 10 miles across frozen fields, along muddy wagon roads, through patches of thin woods. Her feet were wrapped only in rags. She was terrified every moment that she would hear hoofbeats behind her. She prayed aloud the entire way, asking God to guide her steps and protect her baby. She finally reached the home of Isaac and Maria Van Wagenen, a Quaker couple known throughout the region for their opposition to slavery. The Van Wagenens took her in without hesitation. They fed her, warmed her, and then, most importantly, they paid John Dumont $20 in cash to legally purchase Isabella's freedom. At roughly 30 years old, Isabella Baumfree was no longer anyone's property. She was free. She remained with the Van Wagenens only long enough to regain her strength and repay their kindness with work. Then came the crushing news. Her 5-year-old son Peter had been illegally sold south to a buyer in Mobile, Alabama. New York law explicitly forbade the sale of enslaved children out of state, especially before full emancipation. Isabella refused to accept the loss. She found a white lawyer named Mr. Chip. She used every penny she had saved from years of small domestic jobs. She gathered witnesses who had overheard Dumont discussing the sale. She took the case to the Ulster County Court. Because Black people were barred from testifying against whites in New York courts, she could not take the stand herself. She stood outside the courthouse every day, praying, waiting, refusing to leave. In late 1828, the judge ruled in her favor. Peter was ordered returned to New York. When he arrived, he was limping, covered in bruises, and so traumatized he barely recognized his mother. But he was home. It was one of the very first documented cases in which an African-American woman successfully sued a white man in an American courtroom and forced him to return her stolen child. In the early 1840s, Isabella moved to New York City. She worked as a live-in domestic servant for several prosperous families. She saved money, sent what she could to support her children, and joined the Mother African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. She sang in the choir, attended prayer meetings, listened to powerful sermons, and began speaking herself during testimony time. Her voice, deep, resonant, carrying effortlessly, drew listeners even in a crowded sanctuary. In June 1843, she experienced a powerful spiritual vision. She said the voice of God spoke directly inside her heart. He commanded her to leave the city, to walk the countryside, to speak truth to everyone who would listen. She believed the instruction was literal and urgent. She gave away almost everything she owned, keeping only a few changes of clothes, a small amount of money, and a sack of bread and dried fruit. She took a new name. She chose Sojourner because she would now be a traveler, a wanderer with no fixed home. She chose truth because she vowed from that moment forward to speak only what was real and honest. From that day on, she was Sojourner Truth. She began walking first through New York State, then into Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Maine. She slept in barns, on porches, in haylofts, sometimes in the homes of strangers who offered shelter after hearing her preach. She spoke in village squares, on street corners, at camp meetings, in abolitionist lecture halls. She carried no notes, no Bible, no prepared text. She spoke from memory and from lived experience. She described slavery so vividly: the smell of the overseer's tobacco, the sound of chains at night, the cry of a child being taken away, that audiences often wept openly. She spoke of God's justice, God's mercy, and the unforgivable sin of holding any human being in bondage. On May 29, 1851, Sojourner Truth entered a large brick church in Akron, Ohio. She had come to attend the Second National Women's Rights Convention. The hall was crowded with mostly white, middle-class women arguing passionately for suffrage, property rights, education, and equal treatment under the law. Several men sat among the audience, openly heckling the speakers. They shouted that women were too frail, too emotional, too delicate to handle the responsibilities of citizenship. Sojourner sat quietly in the back for hours, listening. Finally, she stood and asked for the floor. The room quieted. She walked slowly to the front in her plain Quaker bonnet, dark shawl, and simple dress. She stood very tall despite years of crushing labor. Then she began. Her voice started low and calm. She described working in fields as hard as any man, plowing, planting, harvesting from dawn until the stars appeared. She described bearing at least 13 children and watching most of them sold away into slavery. She described crying out in a mother's grief and hearing no human answer, only Jesus. Then her voice rose like a gathering storm. She turned toward the men who had been interrupting all day and said, "That man over there says women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man, when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children, and seen most all sold off to slavery, and when I cried out with my mother's grief, None but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? The hall went completely still. Then it exploded in applause, shouts, and tears. Many women were sobbing openly. Even some of the heckling men dropped their eyes. Those few minutes in Akron changed the conversation forever. The speech was printed in newspapers, reprinted in pamphlets, quoted in meeting halls across the North. It forced the young women's rights movement to confront its own blindness to Black women. It forced the abolitionist movement to confront its own blindness to women. It became one of the most quoted, most powerful declarations of human worth in all of American history. When the Civil War began in April 1861, Sojourner Truth was already in her mid-60s. She did not retire. She moved to Battle Creek, Michigan, to live near her daughters Diana and Elizabeth. She immediately began traveling across Michigan, speaking at churches, town halls, and recruiting stations, urging young Black men to join the Union Army. She visited contraband camps, makeshift settlements of thousands of people who had escaped slavery and reached Union lines. She nursed wounded Black and white soldiers. She cooked pots of soup, washed blood-soaked bandages, sang spirituals, prayed beside dying men. She met mothers who had walked hundreds of miles, carrying infants to reach freedom. She held their hands and told them they were no longer property. In October 1864, she traveled to Washington, D.C. She was granted a private audience with President Abraham Lincoln in the White House. She later said he greeted her kindly and called her auntie. She thanked him for the Emancipation Proclamation. But she also spoke plainly. Freedom written on paper was not enough. She told him freed people needed land, schools, voting rights, and real protection from revenge. Lincoln listened without interrupting. She left the meeting believing he was a good man, but knowing the larger struggle was far from finished. After the war ended in 1865, she continued her work. She lobbied members of Congress to set aside public land in the West for freed families so they could become self-supporting farmers. She collected signatures on petitions. She was repeatedly ignored. She faced death threats, mob violence, and arrests for speaking in public. In Rochester, New York, a pro-slavery crowd once threw her down a flight of stairs. She broke several ribs. She returned to the podium the following night. In her 70s and 80s, Sojourner Truth lived quietly in Battle Creek, Michigan, in a small house friends had helped purchase for her. She suffered from severe arthritis, the accumulated damage of decades of heavy labor, and recurring pain from old injuries. She continued to speak whenever her strength allowed, on temperance, women's suffrage, prison reform, equal rights for all. She met Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Frances Willard, and many other reformers. She reminded them again and again that Black women must not be left behind in any fight for justice. She sold cartes de visite photographs of herself to raise money for her causes. On the back of each card she had printed, "I sell the shadow to support the substance." She became one of the most photographed Black women of the 19th century. She loved her grandchildren and great-grandchildren fiercely. She told them stories of Mau Mau Bet, of the old plantation days, of the long walk to freedom, of the courtroom victory, of the thunderous day in Akron. On November 26, 1883, Sojourner Truth died peacefully at her home in Battle Creek. She was approximately 86 years old. Her funeral drew hundreds, Black and white, rich and poor, famous and unknown. They came to honor a woman born into chains who died a free citizen. They came to honor a voice that had thundered across the nation for half a century. They came to honor a mother who never stopped fighting for her children and for every child held in bondage anywhere. Sojourner Truth left behind no books she wrote herself, no large fortune, no formal political office. What she left was infinitely more powerful. She left a voice. She left a question. Ain't I a woman? She left a life that proved one person, armed only with truth, courage, faith, and unrelenting determination, can bend the arc of history. Today, her name is carried by elementary schools, high schools, middle schools, streets, parks, military bases, scholarships, and community centers across the United States. Her statue stands in the United States Capitol building. Her words are taught in classrooms from kindergarten to university. Her image has appeared on postage stamps. Her photograph is displayed in museums and libraries nationwide. Her story is told to children as proof that no chain is ever strong enough to hold the human spirit forever. She was born a slave. She died a free woman. She spoke truth. And the truth still thunders.